Alright, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Keenan. Welcome to the Franchise Sports Talk College Football Blog. Here to recap week 7 of the college football season. As you can see based on the look in my face, I was not happy what I saw over this weekend, and I am just flat out embarrassed. Now I'm just gonna up and get this out the way, talking about my Texas Longhorns. They had a Red River rivalry matchup against the Oklahoma Sooners in which they got killed 63-21 in this route, and I can't believe OU just flattened and punished Texas throughout the entire game. They pretty much used the same scheme West Virginia used in running the football with Andrew Bowie for over 200 yards. Now Damian Williams was the star in this matchup, ended up having the biggest run in the history of this matchup, 95 yards for a touchdown, but also Blake Bell was a big factor in this game. 4 rushing touchdowns. That Texas defense just got flattened and they couldn't think of nothing to do throughout the entire game. They ended up scoring most of their points going towards the end of the game with Case McCoy throwing for 2 touchdown passes. David Ash had to leave the game due to injuries, and Case McCoy ended up taking over and did play pretty well. I'll give him that. But overall, this was just a flat-out disappointment towards me and my Longhorns, and a big embarrassment. They just couldn't get nothing going. Bob Stoops still owns Mack Brown overall in this matchup. Mack Brown only won this game 3 times. I am not happy with my Texas Longhorns in this matchup, especially during that at the end of the half. They ended up getting killed, and a lot of the Texas Longhorn fans left the stadium, Dallas, at the Cotton Bowl at halftime. I was just amazed to see how poorly that Texas defense performed in this matchup, and this pretty much says it's pretty much an over season for the Texas Longhorns. The only thing they can do is end strong and win a bowl matchup. They are not going to a BCS bowl game with their second loss, with their having their second loss, especially with a loss as big as this one. Now, overall in this matchup, like I said before, this was a huge disappointment. Mack Brown's job should be in jeopardy based on this game. He just continues not to win the big games. Now, he had a couple of big victories, 2 Big 12 championships and a national championship back in 2005. I am proud of that team, but they did have Vince Young. Now, like I said, they did get a second Big 12 championship with Colt McCoy, but they barely pulled off the victory due to the last second opportunity in kicking the field goal for the Texas Longhorns, and then they got killed by Alabama in that national championship the following game. Now, Mack Brown's, like I said, his job should be in jeopardy because of this one, because he always ends up struggling against the big opponents, particularly the Oklahoma Sooners in that Red River rivalry. But he did make an announcement that he does not plan on retiring based on this route, but his job should be in jeopardy because of the disappointment that for the past couple of seasons with the Oklahoma Sooners and their losses. Now I'm going to go ahead and go straight down to the rest of the games this past weekend. Louisville beat Pittsburgh 45-35. They had a good game, staying undefeated in the Big East. Rutgers passed by the Syracuse Orangemen. That was a great matchup, good defensive showdown for the Rutgers Scarlet Knight defense. Now they have 2 teams they need to worry about. I mentioned Louisville earlier, and Cincinnati. All 3 of these teams are still undefeated. Going back to the Big 12 Conference, number 6 Kansas State ended up escaping Iowa State 27-21. Good defensive effort on the defensive side, playing a little bit disciplined, but from the heroics of Colin Klein, rushing for a couple of touchdowns and leading this team to a victory and staying undefeated. But they still have a couple of key matches later on in the season in the Big 12 Conference. Going to the ACC, North Carolina went past Miami 18-14 due to the efforts of Giovanni Bernard. A second straight great game, 177 yards on rushing. UCLA's defense stepped up in this one, beating Utah 21-14. That was a game that I had wrong. I was actually going to go with Utah in this matchup. And one of the games of the week, Notre Dame, number 17th ranked team in the nation, edged out number 17 Stanford 20-13 in overtime. That defense had another great effort, but the offense was just a little bit shaky. But Tommy Rees pulled his team together in OT, keeping this team undefeated. And they still have a lot of key games left in the season, like against USC and OU. And they have BYU this upcoming week, which I will give you my prediction on Wednesday. Next game I need to talk about, number 10 Oregon State beat BYU 42-24. They remain undefeated, which is a true shocker for me. Number 11 USC beat Washington 24-14, staying with just a 1 loss, still looking for hopes of winning the Pac-12 championship and making it to the Rose Bowl. Now I have a couple other games we need to talk about. Going back to the Big 12, TCU beat Baylor 49-21. I had Baylor going with that game. I had that 1 loss. Number 19, Mississippi State did beat Tennessee 31-41. This was an upset alert for the Bulldogs, but they remain undefeated, and I do like their defensive effort, especially cornerback Jonathan Banks. He's actually on my watch list for the 2013 NFL Draft. And a big high-scoring matchup between the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs and the Texas A&M Aggies. I went with the Aggies in this one, and they did pull off a close victory, 59-57. Actually, the Aggies was actually killing the Bulldogs early in the game, but the Bulldogs ended up fighting their way back, getting this game close, but they just suffered just a 2-point loss, and they had their first loss of the season. Now, going to go to the big upset of the week. Number 5, West Virginia got killed by Texas Tech 49-14. That aerial attack just attacked that secondary for the Mountaineers. That was their key weakness and their vulnerability with their pass defense. They no longer have Bruce Irvin, so they kind of lack the pass rushers, and that secondary is just horrendous. And that Texas Tech, led by quarterback Seth Doohy, ended up just attacking the defensive backs and affecting that pass defense for the West Virginia Mountaineers. Now, on the offensive side, Geno Smith just couldn't get with a rhythm overall. He had decent numbers. He did throw for a touchdown pass and over 250 yards, but those aren't good enough at Lubbock, and that kind of dwindled his Heisman Trophy status, his candidacy, but he's still one of my top 3 players for the Heisman Trophy this season, and I think he's still a good quarterback overall, but this was a huge loss in the Big 12 Conference. Now, I'm going to head over to the SEC with my game of the week. Number 9, LSU beat South Carolina, the third-ranked team in the nation, 23-21. This was a great showdown. I thought Steve Spurrier was going to have a chance of pulling this victory against a great SEC West opponent, but they ended up falling just short. But this is still a good competitive team, and they still have a chance of making it to the SEC championship. They did beat Georgia, so on a tiebreaker, they're going to outbid Georgia, but they still have to win out the remaining games in order to make it back to the SEC championship. I most likely believe that they're going to play against the Alabama Crimson Tide, but LSU is still in the hunt for the SEC West Championship. Now, overall, what we saw this week, I went 9-5, bad record overall, another bad week, 64%. I'm trying to bounce this back, but I'm struggling a lot in this season. Now, overall, going back to what we saw this week, there was one thing that we learned among the teams in college football for each conference, except for the SEC. All the major BCS conferences, the ACC, the Big East, Big 12, Big 10, and the ACC, all those conferences, except for the SEC, are very competitive this year, and I'm actually unsure who's going to win out these conferences. For the Big 12, the 3 teams I'm looking at, actually the 4 teams I'm looking at, is Oklahoma, Kansas State, Texas Tech is still in the mix, and even with the loss for West Virginia, they are still in the mix for the Big 12 championship, and all 4 of these teams are still going to be competitive. I'm keeping my eyes on most for Kansas State, trying to stay undefeated and win that Big 12 championship outright, but they just have to win a couple big wins against Texas, and they still have to play West Virginia. That's going to be a tough task for them. For the ACC, I thought Florida State was going to pull everything off, but with their loss to NC State, they could actually suffer another loss. So this is going to still be competitive. The ACC championship still out in front, and they could still be competing against Clemson or whoever they play for the SEC title. That's still up for grabs. The Big East, I mentioned before, Cincinnati, Rutgers, and Louisville are all still undefeated, still in the mix. And between the matches between those 3 teams, that's going to be the deciding factor for the Big East championship. And probably the most competitive and surprising conference in college football is the Pac-12. I had USC going undefeated and making it to the national championship, but they suffered a loss to Stanford at Stanford. Then Oregon State, surprisingly, is undefeated. They still have a chance of winning the Pac-12 championship. And same with Oregon, they're still undefeated. All 3 of these teams are still going to be competitive, as well as Stanford. They only have 1 loss in conference play, even though they lost to Notre Dame. Only 1 loss in conference play, so they are still alive to make it to the Pac-12 championship. It all depends on these next coming games coming towards the second half of the college football season. Now, like I said, it's going to be very competitive. Now, headed over to the SEC, I strongly and firmly believe that Alabama is going to win that SEC championship. For what we've seen thus far this season, they have pretty much too much talent and too much strong team overall, strong depth overall against the other teams in college football. They pretty separated themselves and having a league of their own, and they're pretty much staying up top at number 1, and we're going to find out who's going to be number 2. Oregon can still be in the mix. They're still undefeated, but like I said, it's going to be a competitive year. I think Alabama's going to outright win the SEC championship because what we've seen thus far this season, this is pretty easy predictable predicament for me in the SEC championship. But as far as the other conferences, this is going to be a very competitive year, and I'm a little bit concerned to see what happens and interested in what we see later on in the season. Now, the next time I'm going to catch you guys is on Wednesday to give you my Week 8 college football key matches and my predictions, and I'll see you guys then. Thank you for watching today's vlog from Franchise Sports Talk. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.